Hello, I'm Spencer Baculi, the Associate Editor of Bounding into Comics, and welcome to my review of Superman and Lois Episode 3, The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower. Now, this will sound cliche, but for an episode of a show titled Superman and Lois, The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower features very little Superman. And you know what? It was not only still incredible, but also some of the best DC TV produced by the CW in a long while. After having spent 2 weeks establishing its quaint and rural setting, The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower begins with the Kents taking a giant step forward and carving out their own identities in Smallville by putting a symbolic and literal fresh coat of paint on Clark's childhood home. Suddenly, Clark's superhearing makes him aware of an imminent bridge collapse in China, prompting the Man of Steel to suit up, fly across the world, and save the civilians caught in harm's way. Though upon his return his sons are initially excited to learn more about the mechanics of their father's superhearing, these feelings soon turn to anger, as the sudden appearance of Clark in the halls of Smallville High during a confrontation between Jordan and Sean, Sarah's football player boyfriend, leads them to realize that he had been using his abilities to, essentially, spy on them all along. Harboring resentment towards his father's spying and tired of being pushed around by Sean and his friends, Jordan then decides to try out for the school's football team, proceeding to use his elevated strength to excel in the field and push back against his bullies. Unfortunately, his newfound interest in sports is soon discovered by Clark, who in turn forbids him from playing due to the possible harm his powers could cause to the other players. Only after talking with Jonathan, who points to Jordan's newfound confidence and the low ceiling on the limits of his powers as reason to let his brother play, does Clark relent, but not without volunteering as an assistant coach in order to spend more time with his sons. On the other side of town, Lois, now an employee of the Smallville Gazette, continues her investigation into Morgan Edge. However, after being approached by a woman claiming that Edge's corrupt business dealings led to the death of her son, Lois soon finds herself the target of violent intimidation. First, her car is set aflame by a Molotov cocktail just outside her office. Then, after agreeing to meet with the woman to learn more information, she is ambushed by a mysterious metahuman, saved only at the last minute by her use of her signal device and the subsequent appearance of Superman. However, Lois Lane being Lois Lane, the star reporter finds herself all but intimidated, instead dusting herself off and committing herself even further to exposing Edge. Every second I watch Superman and Lois, I find myself taken by surprise, because I genuinely cannot believe I am watching this good of a superhero show on the CW. As someone who watched most of the Arrowverse up until about 2 years ago, believe me when I say this series continues to prove itself as one of the best in the history of DC's television offerings. Right off the bat, I want to once again draw attention to the family dynamics of the Kents, as they're one of the best aspects of this episode. It's heartwarming to see a family treating each other with love and understanding, even in moments of conflict. In fact, the opening scene alone is so endearing and features such genuine character interactions that you'll most likely walk away just a bit jealous of their collective relationship. I mean, I know I did. In particular, Clark's struggle to balance his desire to protect his children and his need to respect their autonomy are relatable to the world's many fathers and father figures. From saving the world with paint on his hands, to volunteering as an assistant coach for the Smallville High football team, Clark's extremely well-intentioned enthusiasm and desire to do right by his sons leads him to come off as a dorky dad in all the best ways. Of course, given that this is still a show on the CW, this episode does feature its fair share of teenage drama, though thankfully it doesn't rely on the same angst-heavy tropes that plague the network's other DC shows. The animosity between Jonathan, Jordan, and the football team is resolved with a satisfying subversion of expectations, with Jordan becoming the star and Jonathan taking on an emotional support role for his brother. Likewise, the breakdown of Lana's family, and its effects on Sarah in particular, avoids overstaying its welcome by switching to the next story beat just before being tempted with the chance to devolve into melodramatic monologuing. Speaking of Sarah, The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower gives audiences their first glimpse into her background, exploring both her broken home and the emotional fallout resulting from a failed suicide attempt that happened prior to the Kents' arrival in Smallville. And while there's little chemistry between Lana and Sarah thus far, as their arguments and emotional conflicts feel very much scripted, a special shout-out should be given to actor Indy Navarrete, as she delivers an authentic and believable portrayal of a teenager caught in the whirlpool of her depression. Turning to the series' title characters, despite the aforementioned lack of Superman in this episode, the 2 times when Clark does don his cape, to prevent the bridge in China from collapsing and to confront Lois' superpowered assailant, are extremely satisfying. The latter in particular stands as one of my favorite moments thus far, as between his realization that his super strength has little effect on the strange metahuman and his quick decision to counter the brute with his ice breath, it's one of the best displays of Superman's use of his powers in recent years. Add to that the appropriate weight being given to his movements during the scene, in particular when the jet engine sound builds up as he rushes to answer Lois' signal device call, and the result is a scene that feels as if it was ripped straight from the comics. To that end, Though Captain Luther is absent throughout the entire episode, this is to the story's advantage. His absence gives way for the episode to focus on Clark's challenges as a dad, allowing the series to build his character before inevitably presenting a jarring comparison between him and the black-suited version who tortured Luther's world. Personally, I predict that the stark differences between the two will serve as a prominent emotional set piece at some point in the show's future. And while I also want to touch upon Lois and her story, in all honesty, it's hard to find much to talk about regarding it. Unfortunately, outside of her stabbing her metahuman attacker in the ear with a pen, in a moment which both perfectly embodies her character and took me completely by surprise, very little happens in the way of challenging or developing Lois's character. In this episode, Lois serves as the expositional engine, progressing the overall story of the series while Clark handles the intrapersonal conflicts between their children. It's not a bad thing per se, but given the standard nature of her story beats this week, there's just not much to say outside of summarizing her every action. Ultimately, The Perks of Not Being a Wallflower is another fantastic entry in a thus far excellent first season. I walked away from the episode optimistic about the series' future, but still cautious, as I, like many viewers, can't help but worry that the series will devolve into the same usual CW fare we've been getting for years. I hope this never comes to pass, but if it does, at least we'll have gotten a few incredible episodes out of Superman and Lois. Pros: Superman's fight against the mysterious metahuman, Clark's dorky dad demeanor, and the genuine warmth expressed between the Kent family. Cons: the mother-daughter chemistry just isn't there yet for Lana and Sarah, and honestly, I wouldn't say no to seeing more Superman. Overall, 8 out of 10.